Hey, Craig Dostie here with a long overdue episode of Dostie's View here on the Earn Your Turns channel. A couple weeks back, I had the good fortune to run into my old friend Eric Blehm up at Loveland Ski Resort, Loveland Pass, above Eisenhower Tunnel on the notorious I-70. Anyway, we had a chance to sit down and chat besides going and making some turns in some fresh. Eric is the author of The Darkest White. And if you are a skier, or perhaps arguably even more so if you are a snowboarder, especially if you go on the backcountry, this is required reading. And it will, you'll get a lot out of it, a heck of a lot. So I wanted to thank Eric for taking the time, and Adam Howard for setting up the meeting. So thanks, Howie. And here's the interview. All right. That was Adam Howard. I'm Craig Dostie. You might remember me from the Couloir days. I'm the
Les Chronicles de Couloir.
The Chronicle de Couloir. It started as a newsletter, became a magazine, and then we merged with Backcountry magazine. So now I'm a senior editor.
Senior editor.
At Backcountry magazine. And Eric Blehm wrote an amazing book called The Darkest White. All right. And so I wanted to talk to him about this because, at least for me, this is a book that we waited a long time to see. And the reason we waited a long time is because this is about, it's about more than one thing. It's about Craig Kelly, who is a friend of yours.
Yep.
Someone who I was aware of, and I'd met him. I met him at trade shows, but I never got to ski with him, right? But he was a hero in the snowboard world. And Eric and I, we started our careers about the same time writing about the outdoors. For you, it was snowboarding.
Yep.
You were editor of Transworld Snowboarding?
I was editor, but when we first met, I was just a contributing writer for Transworld Snowboarding. And we met in the backcountry, which was the purest place you could meet for two writers. You were the two-planker. I was the, obviously the more, I would say, I don't know, the more awesome tool for snow, obviously a snowboard. Better for all snow conditions. And anyway, you thought you had better mobility, but on the downhill we were pretty even.
We were pretty even. Yes. And Eric contributed in the early days to Couloir, and it became a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah.
I wrote some articles for Transworld Snowboarding, but I think even more than that, we did a lot of tours together. Not a lot, but considering you're living a busy life, I'm living a busy life.
Yeah. We got in the mountains a lot.
Yeah. Still, the trip we did to San Gorgona is one of my fondest memories with Robert Bland.
Yeah.
And the trip we did in Onion Valley, I think that was my fourth day on a snowboard, and I thought I was going to give it up after that.
Yeah.
So pathetic.
Yeah.
But
the snow was heavy. It was Sierra Cement, but it was
Sierra Cement.
But it was an adventure, and that's what, it's funny that you brought that one up, because there was a point where I was going through pockets one day of my old gear, and I pulled out a pocket of a power bar that you gave me on that trip. And it was just a cool moment and it was a crumpled up whatever. And I was getting ready to leave Transworld for a while to go travel the world. And it came to me that like these little bits of trash were treasures. And they brought me back to that moment of us up over Kearsarge Pass, right?
Yep.
And I realized that those are the moments that like stick with you. And it brought it back to that. And I said, I'm leaving the magazine now and I need to go collect more trash. And it all came from that power bar wrapper that you gave me when we were up on this, and I ate it and shoved it in my pocket and found it like 2 years later.
Was it still edible?
It was just a wrapper. I already ate it.
Okay.
It was a trash, literally. So anyways, it was awesome. And it was just another, like a metaphor for these experiences we have and how they can come back to us and they stay with us. And all brought back from that chunk of trash that I found 2 years later.
Something most of you don't know, but Eric introduced me to the split board. And so the first article ever on a split board was in Couloir, courtesy of Eric.
Yeah, I wrote the first one.
I remember when that first came out, I was like, well, actually, that looks really cool. And who made that one? That wasn't a Volet.
It was Nitro, the Nitro Tour. It was heavy. It was stiff. I had to wear, like, essentially, I mean, the boots I wore were basically ski boots. They were Reichly snowboarder ski boots with a snowboard stamp on them. And and it was not fun to ride, but it was functional. And it definitely was better than snowshoes.
Definitely.
Sure. Yeah.
Definitely. So,
yeah,
The Darkest White. What was your original motivation in writing this?
Original motivation was to honor Craig Kelly. I mean, he was an icon. He was the Michael Jordan of snowboarding for my generation. And I realized 15 years after his passing, I was on a chairlift line, and a kid looked at a sticker on my board that I'd kept on all my boards for years. Craig Kelly is my co-pilot. And this kid looked at it. He was a kid. He was in his 20s. At this point, I'm, however old I was at that point, 50. And he just said, "Who's Craig Kelly?" And he had no idea. And I just thought immediately, like, he's being lost to history. His story, the current generation might not know who Craig is. And I thought this is the time to tell that story. And that was really the beginning of it all. That's when I reached out to the family and, got their blessings to go for it. And, but then I realized very quickly, as you noted before, that there was a lot more to the story than just Craig's life.
Yeah, because so here's what Eric's implying. If you haven't read the book yet, and if you're a backcountry skier, this is not just about Craig Kelly, although it is about Craig Kelly. And I think one of the awesome things about this book is it takes an epic tragedy that occurred on Tumbledown Mountain in the Selkirk Mountains, under the guidance of one of the premier guides in the world, Rudy Beglinger, and 7 people died in one day, in one fell swoop, and Craig Kelly was among those. Mm-hmm. And when that happened, I was publishing Couloir magazine, and when I heard Craig was one of the victims, I knew Eric. So I was like, I hate to do this, but Eric, can you write an obit, basically?
Yeah, a tribute story.
A tribute, right? And so we did right away. And
we're good. Have fun, buddy.
We're at a ski resort, so you got to expect things like that.
I love that. Are you kidding me? And he still has no idea. It's perfect. It's good. Yeah. Good.
And so anyway, what I love about the book is there's this tragedy, and my perspective was the avalanche and everything that occurred, because there was a lot of things that came out of it, and I personally was under pressure to come up with a story as well, what happened, and I knew right away there would be, everyone wants someone to blame, and I refused to blame anyone. I tried to lay out, as far as I could tell very early on, what the facts were.
Mm-hmm. But it had to have been difficult, because the facts were not available for a long time.
Exactly. So it's like trying to wade through everything that's out and put out what I was confident was real.
Right.
Okay? And then, personally, I got vilified for not accusing Rudy of being to blame on the internet in Telemark Tips, and there was a thread about the incident that went on for years.
Yeah.
And I mean, the level of anger and just
yeah.
You know.
And Telemark Tips was like one of the early chat rooms, or what would you call it? Where people got on.
It was an early forum, and Telemark Tips was visionary. Yeah. I mean, they had videos, they had photos. People could say anything they wanted, and it had a huge audience. Okay. Mm-hmm. So anyway, Eric wrote the story in the issue of Kuar. I wrote the news story in that, and then Eric writes this book. And what I love about it is yes, there's this accident and 7 people lost their lives, and that's terrible. But he brings a personal touch to it by spending the first half of the book as a dedication to Craig Kelly. And I came away from it going, man, I totally missed not getting to know Craig Kelly and not making the time to ski with him.
Right.
We were in, a little different circles. So that's the way it is.
Well, the crazy thing is, at that point in Craig's life, for the recent 2 to 3 years before his passing, he came to love Kuar. I mean, he became an early subscriber. I introduced him to the magazine at his Avalanche course, his level 1 or at my level 1 Avalanche course. Showed him, hey, there's this magazine, and he subscribed. And I remember you calling me and saying, I just got a subscription from Craig Kelly.
Yeah.
And you were just so fired up. And he later on said in an interview somewhere, where I'm not so up to date in what's going on in the snowboarding magazines. I really like the smaller magazines like Kuar, and you get these stories of, working hard and for whatever it is, an adventure, earning your turns, and then these stories about it. And that's just what I'm drawn to now. And so it was really awesome to write a tribute also for transworld snowboarding, which I did as well. But I have to say, it was really close to my heart to do it in Kuar, because I know Craig.
That's where he wanted it to be.
He would have wanted it to be there, because that was his kind of his magazine for several years before his passing. Is just something he said it was one of the only magazines that he would read cover to cover. So yeah.
Yeah, and we treated everyone like, in the early 90s there was this friction between snowboarders and skiers and on, and that sort of banter still goes on.
Yeah, like me, by telling you that the snowboard is clearly the superior slope tool.
Right. No.
And we know that's true on camera. But you can go on. Sorry. Yeah. We can debate that later, but anyway, on film though, let's keep it focused on snowboarding is the superior tool.
For downhill.
I am messing with him right now. Okay. I love to make you laugh, Craig.
That's all right. We're not gonna
go there.
But
who went there?
Here's the other thing that I loved about this. I didn't know about Craig Kelly's background. Okay, yeah. I know he's a snowboard hero, and I love the fact that he made a shift towards becoming a guide, and not standing on a podium, per se. Yeah. But I didn't know his background.
Yeah.
And that was really an interesting and I think an important part of this book, because when it dovetails towards the end with all the events that went down when he died in the avalanche, even if you didn't know him, after reading this book, you feel like you knew him. And so now you really feel that sense of loss.
Yeah. Well, that was the goal, and I also felt I felt a high degree of weight on my shoulders to make sure that the other people are recognized as well who were killed. At Craig's memorial service, his family wanted to make it clear that even though he was the most famous person, didn't make the other deaths any less tragic. And so I remember at the memorial service for Craig, his parents started it by reading the names of all the others who were killed. And then at the end of that, his father said, and Craig. And he barely got that out. And I felt I really wanted to pay tribute to all these people, because a lot of them, I came to find out, had a lot of questions themselves, and they were there. So I got their individual perspectives, but it's really hard sometimes when you're in a chaotic situation to see the whole picture. It's kind of the opposite of seeing the forest for the trees. When you're in it, you are not really seeing that whole what is going on. And by talking to everybody and piecing together the elements and the bullet points of where people's memories coincided, I wanted to just try and get the closest thing to the truth that occurred, not only at the Avalanche and that heroic effort that they did as clients to uncover this,
to try and
massive,
save somebody.
multiple burial, 13 individuals, wiped from the face of the earth, and then boom, they're like, we have minutes to try and get these people out, but also to try and pay tribute to just the overall thought process of the assistant guide, of the lead guide, and the individuals leading up to it, because they're those little voices. People talk about that in avalanches all the time. I had this feeling, and a lot of people, there's a couple that are mentioned in the book that they never actually even voiced that, and that was fascinating. And also with that whole vilification that people wanted to vilify somebody, they didn't really understand the build up to this event. The full snowpack, which I began the book in that winter at the first snowfall of the winter, and then worked my way through the tests that Rudy did, the fears that Ken Wiley felt, the trepidation and the confidence. And by putting that all together, you get a better understanding of, a lot of people would say, why were they even there? And I knew Craig was too smart. Craig personally was too smart to be somewhere where he shouldn't. And so I wanted to understand what he had learned in his training. He was training to become a guide. And so by piecing all that together, it's a little long-winded what I'm trying to say, but the point is that there were a lot of converging thought processes that put them there, and I just felt the world and the survivors especially deserved that perspective. Finally, many years later.
I think they did, and what I love about it, there was a lot of things. I mean, because of my involvement writing the story, and then being vilified for not blaming someone, and I paid a lot of attention to all kinds of things, and my sense of it was, in the end, ignoring how many people died. In the end, it was an avalanche, and it was an oversight of conditions that were there that were not easy for anybody to accurately predict.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
and so stuff happens.
Low probability, high consequence.
Right.
Was what
Right.
was going on.
Right.
And at other touring operations and heli ski and cat operations, we're dealing with the same thing across the whole province and across Canada.
Do you remember the name of the telemarker who died? I'm going blank right now. Dennis. Was it Dennis? No.
Dennis Yates?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I just throw this out because you and I talked about this. When you were writing this, you called me because I had some insight.
For sure.
Right? And this didn't come out in the book, and that's okay, but for you. I had dinner with Dennis Yates, I don't know, 3 years before at Bear Valley, at a Bear Valley Telemark Festival. And so we're kindred members of the Telemark tribe, but we're talking about gear because it's what we do.
Yeah, a lot of that.
And we were both recognizing that if we were caught in an avalanche with our gear, it's non-releasable. And so we had the frank conversation. So does that make you want to get a releasable? And he's like, no, I'm willing to take my chances. Now that's easy to say, right?
Yeah.
And now we can see in hindsight, maybe he wouldn't be so willing to take the chance.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's this tendency, I think, that we all have to, we want to be aware and we don't want to be cavalier, but on the other hand, we want to be out there. And at some point, something is going to persuade you to keep moving forward when maybe you shouldn't.
Yeah.
And I think this gives an in-depth look at that.
Right.
Because there's so many subtle things. Rudy's a guy. He's hired to take people into the backcountry. It's his responsibility to show them a good time.
Right.
And you didn't really point this out, but in my experience, very few guides know the line between a slope that will go and a slope that will hold as well as Rudy.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean he's infallible.
Yeah.
But
you're not the first person that said that. And there are people that said, he will. And people who go with him in the past, maybe not, maybe it's mellowed out after this, perhaps. But in general, he took him to the stuff that they would want to ski, where a lot of places and a lot of guides won't.
Right. I mean, one of the best, my top 10 most memorable runs was with Rudy. And we were skinning up this slope, and every time we made a switchback, there was a little bit of a slough. And everyone in the group was, and I told you about this, but I'll share it. Everyone asking me, Craig, where is Rudy taking us? Like, every time we make a switchback, there's a little avalanche. So I got up to the top and I was like, Rudy, what are we doing here?
I remember this story.
And he gave me a quick little, tutorial. And he just said, all right, so if you're worried about an avalanche, what are the things you got to be worried about? There was fresh snow. It's unconsolidated. Is it bonded or not? Yep. Okay. How steep is the slope? Can it keep going?
Yeah.
I was like, what do you mean? He says, if it starts, will it keep propagating and grow, or will it kind of just dissipate? He says, did you notice every one of those? It started and then it stopped. It started, went down a ways, hit a tree and stopped. Started and stopped. I went, oh, you're right. So in other words, this is like right on the edge.
Right.
Oh, and it was a 45-degree slope. And oh my goodness, it was just open it up and let it rip. And one of my best runs, one of my favorite memories, because he knew where the line was.
Yeah.
So what's been, for you, the most satisfying part about writing this?
I mean, it was 5 years of dedicated research. And obviously, I think right now it's been back to my number one goal was it's really introduced Craig to a lot of people who did not know him. A lot of emails, a lot of texts, a lot of reviews of people saying, I had no idea this person existed. Great. One of the nicest things I've heard was at the Banff Mountain Book Festival, a guide said that you have provided, this was a very polarizing topic, and you have provided a lot of healing because a lot of things a lot of things people didn't talk about, they talked to you. And it's just given us more of a perspective that's allowed us to, not have these question marks, and it's a combination of things like, oh, I should have done this or shouldn't have done this, but just understanding exactly what went on that day and lead up, that was one of the nicest things. The feedback was, you've helped a lot of people heal. And there's, of course, there's people come into this with their own baggage. Everybody does. There are some people that come in and then walk away thinking, oh, wow, this person is a lot that I didn't know, and this guy is whatever, and then this person is whatever. And I'm not saying it here on camera because I do want people to read the book, and I also was very careful how I worded it in the book. So it was as balanced as possible.
No, I think you did a great job because I read Ken Wiley's book. I know Rudy pretty well. And, I've been to his operation at least a half a dozen times, if not more. I know his level of professionalism. I met Ken Wiley as well. I knew people in that group besides Dennis Yates. They were my neighbors.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I heard and I saw the pain in the aftermath. And so it was one of those subjects that it was like, I wish I could, but I can't talk about it. And now I have a reference. I know I can say, look, if you want an in-depth understanding, read this book first. Yeah. And then let's have a discussion. Maybe. Maybe we'll need a discussion. Maybe we won't. Okay. Yeah. But I know it. I felt after reading this, I had closure. Whereas before, I always felt like there's something that hasn't been revealed. And there may have been stuff that you held back on. And that's your, I would say that was your maturity to know when to hold and when to fold.
Where to find that line.
Yeah.
I mean, it could have, there's some things for sure. that were like that I decided, you know, in the interest of balance and things that are out of context, I would keep them out. But also the survivors and the family members of those, many of the victims have come to me and, you know, with you know, appreciation. The vast majority. There's been a few people that have come back and said, "Wait, you didn't cover this or this and this," and it's, you know, one person even said it was one-sided. I don't think that's possible. I interviewed like almost every single survivor, and I used their notes and things and records from what happened that night. Like, people took notes and diary entries, and the RCMP did interviews within a day or two. And I used a lot of very current information. So it's not based upon the memories from 15 years ago that I wrote this book. It was from nearly a dozen, well, close to a dozen people came to me with their current, then real-time written recollections of what went down.
And they probably hadn't shared that with anyone else.
Almost none of them had. And so, and you know, in different languages, I had to get one from Ajay Flutman that was in another language, translated, you know, things like that. So yeah.
Now I'm trying to remember, I don't know if it's your book or Ken Wiley's book, but I think it's yours, where one of the victims knew something was wrong seconds before.
Yeah.
Was that you?
Well, Wiley actually mentions Beeler,
yes,
who got a crazy feeling like I shouldn't be on this slope. But I also had another individual, Joe Pojar, who was at the back of the line thinking when he saw him coming to the top, getting onto the slope underneath the other group, he was even like trying to think, like, I want to, like, if I could have done anything, maybe I could have faked equipment failure to keep us from getting on that slope. And that was a person. And then there was, of course, you know, one of the victims themselves told Ken Wiley right before, "I don't like being beneath that group." So there was at least three that we know about. And Ken Wiley did, to his credit, mention that individual, which has been heartbreaking to learn and say and remember, this one individual who said, "I don't like being under the other group." And Wiley decided, no, I'm still going on the slope and I'm bringing my people. So, you know, there's a lot of things that are just trying to report what happened and let people get into their, you know, Ken and Rudy's mindset. And obviously there's regrets and things they wish they would have done differently. But at the end of the day, it's that human factor. And that's how I kind of ended the whole book, where Craig knew that if anything was going to ever go wrong, there was a couple things that were technically in the snowpack, but there was one thing that he said he knew would always be involved, and that was the human factor. And so that's where I left it. And I hope that people that read the book take it that way without their own, you know, harshness towards anybody individually, and just learn and try and learn from it. And I think that would make all the victims, the family members of the victims, happy. I know Craig would want that. And,
yeah,
you know, Craig's his widow, Sabina, at one point said, you know, Craig knew what he was doing. Like, basically, he's a big boy, and he made that decision. And, you know, the weather changes, things change, and things happen. And the people who are doing this, and the reason we love this, we understand that.
Yeah, it's a great book. So if you're a backcountry skier or snowboarder.
Yeah, you know, I have to say, by the way, the spirit of Gliss, I'm obviously ribbing Craig here big time, and he's letting me very graciously. But we've had so many great days, and Craig had so many great days with skiers. Just getting out in the mountains with I don't care what's on your feet, and neither did Craig. And I think that is so rad, to use a word from our era. So rad that you just have to get on the mountain and get in the snow. And yeah, the fresh snow is by far the best. But just getting out there, it's awesome. It's a brotherhood. It's a camaraderie, and they're the reason we keep coming back.
Exactly. So the Darkest White, it's available on your site, your website. What is that?
You know what? It's
available.
Well, you can find where to buy it there, but I send everybody to their local bookstores. It's audiobook now. It's an ebook. Support your local bookstores.
Okay.
And it's available everywhere. And it's available in paperback now, actually. So
awesome. So pick it up, read it. It's gonna cut you, but it's gonna be a good cut. It's gonna be the kind of thing that you're gonna be glad you read it, and you're gonna wish you knew Craig Kelly as well as Eric did. It made me wish I'd taken the time. And you know what? There's other people in your life. You got to spend time with them. because we're not all going to be here forever.
Yeah,
Avalanches happen.
they do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric.
for doing that. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Well, as you can see, Eric and I go back a ways. It was really great to see him again. So again, pick up Eric's new book, The Darkest White. If you're a skier or snowboarder, it will definitely touch your life. This is a big deal. 7 people dying in one day, and even if it's just one, I mean, whenever there's a death in the community, it's like an earthquake in the spiritual realm, and it affects everyone. And the accident, January 20th, 2003, affected a lot of people. Okay, you'll get a lot out of reading this book. Arguably, you get more out of reading this book in terms of knowing what to look for and avoid than you will digging a whole bunch of pits in the backcountry. Okay, so pick it up, check it out. Oh, and I got to say, Eric is right that in terms of downhill performance, it's really hard to beat a snowboard, especially in junk snow. And that just, up the ante when you're in powder, okay? But I maintain having 2 boards on your feet allows for more versatility, especially with telly, because you can do more than parallel turns, all right? And Eric and I both agree that in POW and soft snow, toe side turns are the bomb. Absolutely, okay? But the thing is with telly, if you can do it, it's toe side all the time. Just saying. All right. Dostie here, checking out. Be sure to pick up The Darkest White at your favorite bookstore, wherever that is, online or brick and mortar. And remember, you appreciate them a whole lot more when you earn your turns.